Hey, thank you everyone for joining the session. Thank you, Prabneet and Sarmishta, for joining the session. How are you guys?
Doing great, Udit. How are you?
Perfect. I'm doing well as well. Good start to the new year.
Yep, definitely. Lots of exciting things happening, I guess, work-wise and personally. So yeah, it's going well for now.
Perfect. And I hope all our viewers, audiences are also having a perfect year, right? Good start. And this is Everest Group first LinkedIn live session of 2025. So I can't be more excited. I see Prabneet is having her espresso shot, right? Getting charged up for the session. And
Yeah.
Sarmishta with all her smiles. So we'll give some
Yeah.
time for people to join in, right? Maybe a couple of minutes. But before that, just want to say, welcome to the session. Thank you for taking out the time for this. The topic for today is the comeback of the productivity era in digital workplace. The session will be recorded. It will be available, obviously, on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. And maybe we kickstart the session, with an interesting question. And please don't worry, I won't ask the conventional question, "Where are you joining from?" Right? I think let's skip that part. But what I hope is, irrespective of which part of the world you are joining, you are healthy and doing well, and that's what matters. But maybe what would be interesting and curious for me to understand from our audiences, and I see people have started to dial in, comments started to flow in, is, and on a lighter note, right? What would be that one magical digital workplace feature you wished your company had? And again, this is for all the people joining in across the world. Do let me know your thought. Again, it's not a very formal question. So feel free to think outside of the box and let us know your answers, what you think in the comment box. But hey, Pramneet, meanwhile, why don't you give me your take on this?
Sure, Udit. And very interesting question to start a conversation today with. So that we have been working in a hybrid mode for many years now, and a lot of times when I'm having conversations with my teammates or with the clients, I just wish I could teleport for to them so to have that conversation in person, especially when we having a complex brainstorming kind of conversation. Something like the flu powder was there in the Harry Potter, maybe something similar. And I believe avatars and immersive collaboration sort of promise that, but I hope they mature more so that we can adopt and get that benefit of, you know, to feel that we're actually teleporting to the person and collaborating in real time. So, yep, that's my magical wish.
I wonder if Daryl in the comment box, so I see him, he's either taking a flight or on a flight, right? I wish he could have teleported versus taking the flight.
Yeah.
But hey, Daryl, thanks for joining in and hope you have a good flight.
Yeah.
So very interesting
Well,
answer,
love.
Pravneet.
Yeah,
Thanks for your take.
yeah, sure.
Sarmishta, what about you? What's your that one magical feature you wanted in your digital workplace? And I'll take it as a
Uh,
feedback.
yeah, sure, Udit. So before answering the question, hi everyone, good morning and good evening, for people joining in from different places. Coming to the question, for me, a feature which can make a high quality slide or a framework when we dictate the instructions, or let's say when we give a very detailed prompts, is what I believe can be a magical feature for me and for our team, especially when there is a hurry to wrap up something and you have to work and discuss for hours to get to that final deliverable. So, if a platform can make a slide and not the low pixelated images that we do get now from different tools, but yeah, a very high quality slide, it would be great. And this would be that one magical feature I wish our organization had. Now, Udit, you have heard both of our both of our answers, right? What is your idea of a magical feature you wish our organization had?
So, Sarmisha, first of all, I also need that feature, right? I would love to become lazy. And it's not actually lazy, but yeah, basically, if I just,
What else?
say out
What
something and
else do
slides
we
get created. I think Scott is also talking about
Yeah,
similar things in chat. He's
yeah.
asking for, a voice activated AI office assistant. That's actually there, right? But I think where Scott is focusing more is that understood my content and communication, right? And also the context might be here. So I hear you, Sarmishta. I hear you, Scott. I think the point is understanding what we actually need. And again, sometimes you might have solutions that take those inputs but do not represent, give back the outcome or output that you're expecting for. So I
Yeah.
understand. And that's also one thing which is important for me. So if I were to talk about my magical feature, I think more often than not, what happens is I'm usually thinking about something that I read or maybe wrote some years back, maybe a slide I created, maybe a framework I created, let's say 6 years back. And I remember, hey, that's something that would be very relevant for my use. Maybe I want to reshape it, reuse it. But mostly I just forget where that document is, right? So while we talk about knowledge management and everything, and there are things that are happening out here, I would just wish if I there was a way to tell someone, hey, this is something that I need, and I get that document in one click, that would actually make my job much easier. So that would be my magical feature.
We'll take this feedback and do the knowledge management in a better way now.
Yeah, and I also see Daryl talking about the meta glasses, and again, AR, VR, metaverse. I think a lot of people talked about it. It was actually considered magical, but some of the corrections have happened. But I think Daryl, your magical feature looks closer to reality than what ours is. But yeah, thank you for your comments, and maybe Daryl, that will happen pretty soon. Okay, perfect. Given that now we are 7 minutes into the session, right? And again, viewers, feel free to keep sharing your comments, your thoughts. If there's something you want to discuss, talk about, if you have a question, right, we'll try to take them up as soon as possible or during the course of the session. And let's keep it interactive, right? We don't want it to be a monologue. And yeah, whatever works best for everyone who's listening to this, that's the motto of the session. So moving on, right, and before I introduce Prabneet and Sarmishta in a more formal manner in terms of what they handle, I think I want to take some time to talk about why the topic is important and why should we talk about it, right? Again, there are a bunch of LinkedIn lives that keep happening, but I think this is very important and a debate is much needed on this, right? So, at least from my vantage point, what I'm seeing is there's a productivity obsession currently in the business world. And it's not a new thing, right? So, if you see how digital workplace has matured over the years, right, it started with a focus on service standardization, service efficiency. Then there was a time when productivity was at the core of everything, right? It was about getting better at SLAs. It was about making employees more productive, and then the workplace environment matured further, and everyone realized, hey, employee experience needs to be at the core of everything. And so, example, something like and I think for me at least, this employee experience sentiment peaked after the pandemic when everyone shifted to hybrid work. There was a lot of disruption, there was a lot of talent war going on, and employee experience was at the core of it. But if I see what has happened in last couple of years, I think it's a worrying trend that I'm seeing. So the trend that I'm seeing is because of the tough macro environment, tech innovation, we have generative AI, and an efficiency first mindset that has gotten so deep into enterprises. This has, in a way, brought back the productivity era and the focus on productivity centric workplaces. And again, if you think, hey, this productivity obsession or productivity centric workplace is a too far fetched, maybe it's not there. I do have certain facts which might make it more prominent. So, and I would like to take a pause and reflect on them, right? So, when was the last time when any of you, let's say, heard an innovative technology within digital workplace, especially around generative AI or copilot, talking about things like employee delight, or let's say even employee enablement or satisfaction, the feeling of being content with your job, right? I know sometimes these happen, but at least for me, these discussions have been far and few. And mostly what I hear about these discussions is, hey, Gen AI can help you save these numbers of hours. It can help you eliminate this much of manual effort, work hours reduced. And I'm not just saying it, based on my conversations. If you see some of the recent things that have happened, recent announcements that have happened, and again, I'll be quoting these. For example, the Salesforce CEO just recently said, yeah, we do not plan to add any software engineers next year because we have increased the productivity this year with agent force. There was a survey done by beautiful.ai among 3,000 managers, and 41% of those managers expressed a desire to replace employees with more cost-effective AI tools. Another, there is recently World Economic Forum has published the Future of Job report, and that tells you that 39% of the skills will become obsolete due to Gen AI. And by 2030, 41% employers plan to downsize their workforce. Now, if you think that is massive, if you think of the world as 100 companies, 41% of those companies plan to downsize workforce because of Gen AI, and that equals to 92 million job lost. And hey, I'm not against productivity. I understand, be it Gen AI, any tech advancement need to a change of jobs, right? Some jobs do get obsolete. Companies should strive for productivity. Why it is becoming concerning for me is the whole conversation has been around productivity, right? And experience in a way has taken a back seat. And that's why I say there's a productivity obsession versus an attempt to drive a balance between productivity as well as, let's say, something like experience. So this is the core focus of today's session, right? What does a productivity centric workplace means? What would be the challenges as well as advantages of it? And moving forward, how do we try to strive a balance between productivity and experience? And at the end of this session, we'll wrap up with our top predictions, digital workplace predictions and takeaways for 2025. So do that's a an incentive to hold till the end of this session. Now, without any further ado, let me introduce two of my star analysts, right? Pravneet Kaur, who leads all our, flagship peak assessment effort, where we assess providers, vendors' capabilities on the overall digital workplace market. She leads them globally as well as the North American, European cuts. And I also have with me Sarmishta Priyadarshini. She is our, lead analyst for modern work within digital workplace and is a lead for Microsoft Modern Work Assessment. And I am your moderator, facilitator for today. So my name is Udit Singh. I'm a vice president with Everest Group, and I lead the overall digital workplace practice at Everest Group. So with this, with introductions done, introduction to the topic done, let me pass it to Prabneet, right? So we talked about the rise of productivity obsession within digital workplace. And we also talked about, hey, there used to be a productivity centric workplace narrative before we moved towards an experience centric narrative. Now it almost looks like we are again going back to the productivity centric narrative, right? So it's almost like a pendulum that keeps oscillating and one thing leads to the other, right? When experience becomes too important, then people move to productivity, but over time they realize, hey, the brand equity, employee satisfaction, attrition are becoming challenges, and then the focus comes back to experience, right? How do you see this oscillation happening? Do you also agree with this, and anything that you want to share on this?
I think you have very well summarized the triggers for both the eras. You talked about pandemic and the attrition and the challenges that employees basically face at that time to manage work and their personal health and well-being, making experience important in 2020. And now I believe there are some macro factors which are again shifting the focus towards productivity. One is the market is overall tough. We are seeing even developed economies like Germany now facing a lot of inflation and unemployment. Large companies like Volkswagen are shutting down plants, leading to a lot of unemployment and higher inflation rates. And then we are also seeing leaders like Donald Trump, although he has not taken office yet, but he has already made comments like he will be putting tariffs on even friendly countries like Canada. So just imagine what he would do to countries he is directly competing with, like China or even maybe India. So, and that is also putting pressures on enterprises to localize services, which will again shift the focus towards optimizing cost and efficiencies. So there are a lot of such triggers, and then the tech catalyst. All of this is now being catalyzed further by the transformations that are coming up in the market. Generative AI, copilots, agentic AI PCs, all are coming with a wrapper of productivity around them. So again, that is also acting as catalyst. And I'll just talk about this further through a very visual presentation. So yeah, so like you talked about the oscillation, Udit, I believe we are in the productivity era now. And we summarized the triggers, we talked about them, but I also want to focus on what are the different elements that are changing as well. So I want to talk about the methodology, the way technology and processes are being consumed, that also is changing. Previously, the focus used to be on personalized and flexible technologies and processes, but now they are being more standard and rigid. And similarly, business outcomes. Previously, they were both a combination of direct and indirect, and now they're just direct, standard business outcomes that enterprises want to focus on. And I would like to just take one example here, which is of Microsoft Teams. Few years back, if you look at Microsoft Teams, they were pitching Viva as a very important module within that, focusing on employee well-being and engagement. And recently, just now, we are already seeing Microsoft rolling back important components within Viva, like Viva Goals, has been announced that it will be killed soon. And again, the entire focus of that was on collaboration experience. And now what we see, Microsoft Teams, which is same platform but different times, the picture has completely changed. The focus is on bringing automation scripts or meeting assistant that will summarize notes and just tell you next steps to do. So there's complete shift in how the same solutions are being pitched then versus now. So that's my
So
take on this entire thing.
perfect. Thank you, Pravneet. And Samishta, before go to you, right, I think there have been some interesting comments. So I'll just pick some of those. So one of the user, again, they have not logged in by their name. They demand that magical feature to be auto detect your boss's mood through their emails and draft the perfect response. I understand why the person has not logged in through their ID and want to post this as an anonymous, right? But I think most of us, at least, on this chat, do agree to that sentiment. So again, that's helpful. Hey, Daryl, I also agree with your thought, right? So, and that's a very interesting point I want to also talk about. Are organizations actually measuring productivity? I would say they are measuring productivity leakages more versus actual productivity improvement, right? It's more about, okay, is there a way that you can be you are losing on productivity and you just measure that, so you're giving giving a view in terms of, okay, there are leakages, but it's not actually about making employees more productive at larger scales. Here and there some use cases or at some organization obviously do that, but I think at an overall level, that's how I see this. So that's how I resonate with your comment. I also see Vishal joining in. So Vishal, I saw the link that you posted and how US is actually outshining in terms of labor productivity growth, which again talks to the same point, right? What, and we also have a graph around this. And again, I'm not against this. It's actually good to be productive, especially with all the prophecies around population decline. I would actually love if there was a parallel graph around how experience is shaping around it. For me, the challenge is if your productivity is rising, but your experience and satisfaction of the job is stagnant or falling, I think then this is where the challenge is, and we're talking about that balance. And yeah, I know. So that's a banter that we keep having. FC Barcelona games. They're playing much better this year, by the way. They just won recently the Super Copa. So congratulations to them. But yeah, coming back to the discussion, and please keep the comments flowing again. They are a big part of this conversation that we're having today. And it adds a lot of value and depth to these conversations. So, Sarmishta, coming back to you. So we heard what Pravneet said, right? And she also showed this chart which is about oscillation and what it essentially means to be in a productivity era versus a experience era. Have you also seen these situations, especially in recent past, where productivity seems to be in a driving seat, but they it's coming at a cost of experience, or let's say because the focus on productivity centric workplace is so high that the focus on experience in some ways has been diluted.
Yeah. So, Udit and Pravneet, you both had a pretty interesting take on the whole oscillation between productivity first era and experience era. While I do think there should be a balance between productivity and employee experience, like Udit mentioned, there has been a change or shift in the digital work focused towards productivity, and it's pretty evident from our interactions with the enterprises. For example, let's say a couple of years back, right? Conversation AI as a tool, it was used as a lever for employee experience. And the providers actually pitched it in a way that it can enhance employee experience, offering those self service, self healing features. Basically, a powerful tool to empower the employees. But now, with the proliferation of so many conversation AI and similar other platforms, the whole narrative has actually changed. Providers emphasize more towards productivity, highlighting how many hours their tools can save or the cost optimizations that they deliver. And enterprises are actually resonating well with it. And this is one change that we see in terms of how the narrative around the same technology has changed, right? One more example can be how we are seeing the commercials and the contracting that is being done now. So the business matrix, right, and the KPIs that you talked about, they are mostly around productivity, and even something like the XLAs, which ideally should focus on the employee experience part, they are rarely seen in the true form. So they are mostly just glorified SLAs with little to no impact on the employee experience as such. So all in all, we do see that dilution happening with it.
Perfect, perfect. And we also have a question for the panel, right? And given Pravneet, you were part of the North America, Europe, and that's what I'm assuming by different regions, right? Obviously, there are better, more regions there, right? The point is the demand for increased productivity global or regional, as some markets focus more on employee well-being? So it's not monolithic, right? I'll maybe take a jab at it and then pass it to you, Prabneet. But so Vishal, I agree with it. I think some regions, especially I'll call out the regions, right? For example, Europe has traditionally and conventionally been known as a region to focus more on employee engagement and employee satisfaction versus something like North America, right, which tends to focus more on, let's say, speed of transformation. Obviously they also have a focus, but if I try to do a comparison, Europe typically have stood out as someone who's more focused on experience. So I agree with your point, but I think that the theme that we're talking today is it's global in nature, right? You can be at different levels on an absolute basis, but if we see on a relative comparison, I think this trend is global. Across regions we are seeing more and more conversations around productivity, right? And again, you talk about to enterprises, tech vendors, service vendors, right? All the conversations tend to be about, okay, what Gen AI can do, what Copilot do, and all of those ultimately lead to, okay, it can help you save this amount of money, it can help you save, eliminate these jobs, can be more, speed of time of time to market can be reduced, and not a lot of focus around there. So I do agree with your sentiment that different regions are at different level, but relatively the fixation with productivity is very strong. And it will take some time before we start realizing, okay, this productivity is coming at a cost of employee, brand equity as well as employee satisfaction. And then we will, I think the pendulum will again oscillate back to more experience and productivity balance. I also see a question from Siddharth who talks about, with AI agents in the fray, will digital workers be on the rise? Will it force the firm to focus on human-centric productivity, especially developers and the IT services space? Now, this is actually a very interesting question because if you see very recently the CEO of NVIDIA, right? Uh, he called out that the IT department of companies is actually going to be the HR department for digital bots, right? So essentially, what you're saying is employees are going to be replaced with digital bots, and these are not going to be, task or conversation based agents, but think of them as normal employees who do end-to-end piece of work, and even the compensation needs to be that way, right? So your IT department is now actually going to be focusing as HR, right? Which just it's mind-boggling. I was just having a conversation with one of our partners, Google, today, that will a thing like digital bot experience or digital bot productivity also become a thing, right? Will we need to be concerned with something like, hey, will my bot become offensive if I don't reply well to that person, right, to that bot? Will the quality of response that comes from that bot deteriorate if I, let's say, if I am abusive, if I don't do all the nicest read, right, if I don't do the good mornings or the hello or the all the nice things? It could be, right? In fact, in sorry, yeah, Praveen, go ahead.
When we so recently, so Everest Group also onboarded ChatGPT, and we were having this training from the people from OpenAI, and there was very interesting thing they advised to us to benefit from the conversation. They said that you need to give, if you give optimistic feedback to the conversational bot, it will give you better answers. And I was so surprised by that even the generative AI bot, it needs optimistic feedback and a pat on the back that you're doing good, but still you can improve. So that is something that I could just think of when you were saying that maybe these agentic workforce will also need experience management tools in future.
Absolutely. I think even in one of those situations, we had like bots were talking to each other, and again with
Yeah.
all the human niceties, right? And this is again, this is mind-boggling, right? We tend to see bots as just do this work and move out of the place. But I think, Siddharth, to your point, digital workers are definitely on the rise. We actually suspect that by 2030, and there's a lot of research around this, human interactions will be second now, and digital interactions will surpass human interactions that people have within the workforce. Now, what sort of role humans will play out? I think the workplace will need to be human centric, definitely, but the way the workplace is designed, I think it will go through a shift. There will be humans that will be in the loop that will drive a lot of this, but there will be a lot of things that currently humans are doing which is no longer needed to be, which will make your remaining humans employees credible assets. And any workplace to be successful needs to be human centric, and that's so that will have something around this which we call humanizing the workplace. And yeah, that is the need of the hour. So with this, what I want to do is, I think we have established the point that yes, there is a productivity obsession, and we are moving towards a workplace that would be productivity centric, right? But what does it mean for our viewers and enterprises out there? So maybe Prabneet, if you can help us understand, right, when we say productivity centric workplace, what would be some of those technology initiatives, process initiatives that you think will become more important and prevalent till the time we are in this time frame?
Yeah. And Udit, I think we've already talked about some of those technologies. So Mr. Mentioned conversational AI, and I was talking about Microsoft Teams as well. But I think one thing which is very interesting is the agentic AI and the agents that will be coming up, the digital workforce. And the entire conversation around that is again, that they will optimize the work. And the way Jensen Huang was pitching them in the NVIDIA event is that they will be taking up the roles of the entry level people. So maybe they are already saying that human will be pushed out of the loop soon. While till now it was all about giving the comfort to the employees that even if these agents will come into the workplace, you will be kept in the loop and they will be your assistants. Now suddenly the leaders have stopped even using those diplomatic terms. They're already saying that they will start replacing the entry level jobs, and maybe we won't need to hire engineers in the next 1 year. These are the kind of statements that we're hearing. And then it's not just technology with it. I'm also seeing a change in how these technologies are being consumed and a change in the processes. So earlier, it used to take like maybe 3 to 5 days to onboard an employee, getting their documents ready, getting the right device to the person according to the persona, and then the applications also according to the role. But now I see it happening in half a day or even one day. That is the kind of expectation that enterprises have. And while it does again improve the productivity, I'm seeing that it does impact the employee experience. They are just getting standard devices, VDI, maybe leveraging VDI, standard devices with standard applications. They're not customized to their roles and needs. And again, it is hitting the experience, is what I'm seeing. And I was having this conversation with Sir Mista also recently, and she was showcasing me some very interesting analysis and survey insights that she got, and which very well resonate with the conversation that we are also having. So, Sir Mista, we can talk about that analysis.
Sure, Pravneet. So, adding on to what Pravneet just said about seeing the changes in the technology, right? We also see from our analysis of all the assessments and the interactions that we had with enterprises that there are a few themes that emerge as the key priorities. So, if you take a look at the slide on the top part, so the four themes mentioned here are the key priorities for enterprises for the next 12 to 18 months. So in some capacity, Pravneet has already discussed about this, but if you see the first one, which is around efficiency improvement, so it directly relates to the fact that enterprises are looking for more productivity. Second one is around cloud-based workspaces, which can help in productivity, especially in a couple of ways, which around onboarding, fixing devices remotely, and so on. In the bottom, we have some numbers. So this is from a recent survey and we did this survey during our digital workplace webinar back in October 2024. So here we also asked about the key drivers for the investment in digital workplace in the coming year. And the most answered options were around efficiency and productivity. And again, if you see the employee experience, like investing in enhancing employee experience, it is in the lowest priority for the enterprises now. So basically, all of these does lead us to believe that we are in the productivity era. Yes, Sudhir.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarmishta. And yeah, I think this summarizes it well, right? I remember a few years back when we used to do these surveys, get these responses, employee experience used to be typically number one, right? And I think probably the lower one was, yeah, a survey that we did during a webinar as well. And it was surprising for us as well, right? Employee experience was the bottom-most option that was selected by people such as you who were on that session, right? We were conducting a webinar. We asked viewers to vote, and employee experience came out only with 10% of the votes, which I think summarizes the picture, right? But at least in all this doom and gloom, I see, hilarious comment from Ricky, right, which brought a chuckle to my, for me, and which was to our previous discussion, right? What if digital bots are being treated as employees, right? And the IT department actually transforms as an HR department, as is being said, right? So then will there be performance reviews for bots? And maybe the incentive is more compute power. And it just, it's mind boggling to think, what if they're not satisfied with their performance reviews? Will they start giving wrong answers if I ask something? Or will they start misdirecting us? I think again, all these conversations are something that I don't actually want to, even discover. But I think Catherine also makes a very good point. I think she's talking about what we also say as a zone of sustained employee experience. That if you focus on well being and you focus on human centered experiences, you actually lead to a situation where you have less attrition and you have increased productivity. This is actually more like the end game, even Catherine, we see from our vantage point, that if the focus remains on experience, wellness, satisfaction, you, irrespective of all the other factors, you will lead to a situation where you have more productivity. Unfortunately, I think this is not happening right now at the level I would want it to be, right? And that's what we are saying. Experience seems to have taken a back seat, where, again, people are getting fired. Attrition is not really a challenge because the macroeconomic environment is so doom and gloom that people are, hesitant in switching companies. They are postponing some of those plans. Talent is readily available as of now, right? So this is not that big of a concern for companies as much as I would like. But again, all of this, if not resolved in time, ultimately leads to what we saw, something like a resignation war or a talent war, because you have a talent base that is dissatisfied. The only reason they're not switching job is because the job market and the macroeconomic environment were tough, which by the way have been improving, right? If you see even the latest US job data. So once there is a positive market sentiment, all this pent up, resignations are just piling up. So we might actually see a mini talent war in 2025. But having said that, right? So we have established, Pravneet, Sarmishta, and thank you for all the research that you shared, that we are indeed in a phase where where productivity is at the core of the digital workplace, right? And I understand why it's happening, right? Companies are also under pressure to improve their margins, revenues, profit, whatever you want to call out, right? And employee productivity is, irrespective of other thing, is a key tenet of digital workplace, right? So it's not the villain. The villain is if you do it in a unsustainable manner which does not take into consideration of employee experience. But help us understand, right? If you are going to create a productivity centric workplace in your environment, or if companies are going to move towards this, what are some of those advantages of this approach as well as the drawbacks of these approaches?
Understand that enterprises are for-profit organizations and they do need to focus on productivity and profits and revenue growth. And in the short term, these will have advantages like ROI realization, and the focus on productivity is helping making decisions faster, adopting workplace transformations in a better format, in a faster format. And they will be meeting their short-term goals on, improving cost efficiencies, improving their profits, being more competitive. But I believe that in the longer term, there will be a lot of drawbacks as well. If we continue on this productivity only focused path, the workplaces will become more dehumanized. And this will lead to employee experience. And like we talked, it has already started to take a backseat in the conversations with enterprises, and hence the solutions and strategies being pitched by service providers and technology vendors. So it has already started to take a backseat, and that will lead to employees becoming discouraged, disengaged, discontented, and ultimately that will impact the kind of work they deliver. So, as they say that you can't pour out of an empty cup. So if employees are unhappy and discontented, they will not be able to give the quality outputs, and that will ultimately impact the brand equity and the customer experience as well. So the customer experience will also be impacted, and net the enterprises will not advantage, but there will be a lot of disadvantages for the enterprise in the long term. That's how
Absolutely.
I look at it.
Absolutely. I think this is the same point, right? If you're looking for sustained success, you cannot
Yeah.
take a disproportionately, biased view towards productivity, and it needs to be a balance. But I think there's a very interesting question from Vishal here, right? And what he's referring to different generations. So we keep talking about, there are more, five generations of employees or workforce in companies today, and all of these have different expectations. I would even argue, right, what we are saying is just merely productivity today might have been experience for previous generations, right? So I actually see future generations being getting more privilege in some of those, but obviously the challenges are also different. But I think what Vishal is pointing towards is with more tech savvy generation coming into the workforce, right? Do you see them also seeing this as a challenge, something like co-pilots or Gen AI, right? Will they see this as a challenge that hey, we are being in certain cases being seen merely as units of productivity, right? If you see Copilot saying, hey, it helps you save this amount of work or hours of work, you're actually equating your employees to merely as units of productivity. But the point is this even a challenge for them? Just like something like, not waiting for 8 hours to get resolution might have been a very, normal time frame to wait and could not have led to a poor experience. That might not be, that might not be true today. We are living in a world, at least within India, we have become accustomed to 10 minutes delivery of goods and services, right? Quick commerce. So I think the point is do the current generation and the more tech savvy generation also see this challenge around productivity? And before I go to you guys, I'll just give my take around this. I think so. At least my understanding of the newer generation, and it's fascinating every time I have a conversation with them. Right, I think it gives a new perspective. Is if the tech helps them enable and improve their skill set and do something that was difficult to do, or helps them get that satisfaction and content, even that Pravneet you were talking about, that okay, I did something and I feel good about it, then I don't see this as a challenge. For me, the challenge will be if these tools are positioned in a way, hey, this helps you save this much amount of time, so now you are expected to use that time to do this, then the whole value proposition and the benefit goes away, goes for a toss, right? They want to feel rewarded, that hey, I used my tech, I used my skills to do something in a shorter time frame or to do something of a higher quality, and they want to feel good about it. But if the repercussion is such, hey, you did this, save this time, now focus on this, then again, at least for me, that's a deal breaker. And I would say, the newer generations are much more decisive and much more focused on life balance, satisfaction, and content. So while we might have, been okay with the older generation, I think it will be much bigger challenge if we take a one-sided lens to this. But I'll again open up for you, panelists, if any of you have a view on this question.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. The factors that motivated maybe the previous generations are not the same factors that motivate this generation. Even when I have this conversation with this junior folks in our team, um, I believe they want that gratification for their work, and not just within the team, even outside of the team. That is what motivates them to work and collaborate. And if they get that kind of gratification and that reward, they are willing to go beyond, go beyond the just what is the baseline of the expectation. They're going willing to be more creative. They are going to put more effort and more hours. They are ready to do that. And also, I completely agree with you that they are more decisive and they definitely focus more on the life, the balance, and the well-being. So again, that is another factor that I completely agree. That is why, employees now, they're even focusing on if a company has sustainability as a goal in their, as a part of their enterprise goal. Those are the kind of factors the newer generation they are looking at when they choose which company to go for. It is not just the monetary compensation. They're looking over and beyond that. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Perfect. Perfect. And so, and Pramit, you also mentioned that if you have a productivity centric focus only, it's a short term fix, right? And if I try to correlate with why that should be happening, so I I, I actually feel a lot of time whenever there's a tech revolution, something like Gen AI, people think tech is the answer, right? And they go overboard with tech, right? There will be a proliferation. We are seeing it right now, right? You have Copilot, you have Copilot Studios, you have Agentic AI. Every platform is trying to bring their own set of, Gen AI. I don't know how many Gen AI tools and solutions are out there, right? Or people interact on a day-to-day basis. But what it essentially means is companies tend to get into this loop where they think, putting more tech, more solution is the answer. And we have seen this backfire even in the past, right? There's something which is called point of digital aversion, where the digital toxicity increases so much that people want to detox themselves and they actually become averted, they generate a aversion to tech and move away from it. And we have seen this in real cases as well, right? How many times we have seen companies talking about, hey, yes, my implementation is successful and that was a successful project and all, but when we ask them, okay, how is the adoption? Oh, adoption is low, right? I think we have seen this with chatbot, we have seen this with a lot of technologies, that companies started to think, okay, success means successful implementation, but then they talk about we are not getting the ROIs, our employees are not using the chatbots, our adoption are stuck at 25-30%. So is that truly successful or not? Right. So again, I will ask you maybe, Sarmishta, right? Do you have a view around this? Do you see this situation, first of all, coming up? I know we created this graph, and by the way, this was something that I created way back in 2019 when I was having a situation. The only reason we have it again here is because it's almost like deja vu, and I see the same situations folding out. This is also to the same point that Catherine mentioned in the comment, right? If you have sustained employee experience, then you move to a zone of sustained experience. But Sarmishta, how close are we this to this point of digital aversion?
Yeah, yeah. So I do feel this digital aversion or digital detox that is real, and we have seen this in many client situations. And like you mentioned, a key issue is the implementation adoption gap, wherein enterprises have invested a lot of tools, and due to various reasons, right, be it the proliferation of tools which makes the employees feel overwhelming, or it can also be that multiple generation of workforce that is there, and like they don't have the same level of adoption across, right? So these are very real situations that we see. But then again, we there are companies that are trying to solve these problems by doing a few things. For example, Sira.ai, right? It has introduced this outcome-based pricing model for its AI agents. So basically, it would align all the costs directly with tangible business benefits like resolved conversation or how much time it has saved. So these are a few small things that are being done by enterprises towards solving this digital detox. But then, yeah, this problem is actually very real now.
Yep. And again, as I said, right, it was actually very, intriguing for me to see, okay, how the cycle shifts. And that's why we are saying the comeback of the productivity era and the comeback of this graph as well. But I think true success lies in for enterprises to reach the zone of sustained user experience. I think we have been in the zone of digital awe. Whenever there's a novel technology, people tend to, experiment with it. For GenAI and copilots, I will actually say it was user interest that drove adoption versus companies itself. But again, as we tend to take a one-sided view, this might become a challenge. And this is what we call, dehumanization of the workplace. If you lose the human essence, if you focus just on productivity, if you focus just on, okay, is there a bot that I can create to replace this job? If you just focus on, okay, this is an investment I'll do because it will help me this number of dollars, euros, right? Then I think we move to an era where we are dehumanizing the workplace. And as Pravneet said, that is not sustainable. So Pravneet, can you help us understand? And again, we are moving towards the end of this discussion, right? So if we had to give recommendations how the humanization of the workplace should be, or how do you create a human-centric workplace, right? Very quickly. How do we do that?
Udit. And Udit, I recently read a very interesting Swedish concept which is called lagom. So it's all about taking the middle path and balancing everything in life. I think that is the approach that enterprises should also take. They do need to focus on productivity, like I talked earlier, but they cannot ignore employee experience. And like you mentioned, that the newer generations of employee workforce, they want tools that enable them, but you also need to empower them, let them have a say in what tools will get implemented in the enterprise, what processes get changed, and also make sure that the well-being and growth is also in your focus, and they are included in the decisions and the major changes that you do. So that will be my suggestion to enterprises: do the Lagom way, I would say.
Perfect. And that's a very good way to summarize. And as we promised at the start of the session, right, we will talk about what are our top predictions for digital workplace for 2025, right? So maybe Pravneet, I'll again start with you, right? What are, let's say, your top two or three predictions for digital workplace 2025 that you see from your vantage point, your conversations, as part of the assessment that we've talked in? Again, we tend to take the complete view, right? We talk to enterprises, we talk to service vendors, we talk to tech vendors, and I think all this complete ecosystem brings a good heterogeneous view of the ecosystem, right? So if you were to synthesize all of that, what are your top two, three predictions?
Thing that I would bet my money on. So one is that I'm completely seeing a change in habit on how generative AI solutions and copilots are being adopted. And there are a lot of interesting things around agentic AI also happening. I believe so. My first prediction is that digital interactions will surpass human interactions in maybe 5, 6 years now. That is my first one. And the second one is that I talked about as a service models earlier. I think as a service models, they have their very interesting own benefits. And I believe they will take over the traditional service models. So those are my two predictions of it.
Perfect. And Sarmishta, we cannot leave you without your set of predictions, right? So again, because you also work with a lot of people on the Microsoft Modern Work side, as well as you've been part of the other, conversations. Again, what are your top two, three predictions?
Yeah, so I would like to turn this conversation towards the different segment of digital workplace services. So first is I believe what pandemic did to desk side support, right? Gen AI will do the same to service desk. So what I mean is the pandemic changed the way the traditional desk side support work and enterprises adopted to the new way of working, right? And this was mainly driven by necessity. But at the end of it, not only it changed the whole delivery model, but also impacted the segment in terms of revenue and growth. Similarly, when it comes to service desk, currently generative AI can be seen as an augmentation of features such as automation, intelligence, and self healing capabilities. But it is kind of redefining what support means. And it is shifting from that reactive troubleshooting to proactive autonomous problem solving. And basically, it can impact the segment going forward in the coming future. The second one I have is around the digital experience and the digital adoption segments of digital workplace. So in the future, we would see something like these digital experience and adoption features being embedded in all of the technology platforms versus something it is currently now, right? It's a standalone platform. It analyzes and gives you insights across the enterprises, across the endpoints. So these are two of my predictions.
Thank you,
So
Sarmishta, for those predictions. Yep.
yeah. So that now that you have heard our answers, and is there anything that you would like to add, or which one do you think is a short thing to happen in the near future?
See, as always, like great leaders, I would love to just rehash your answers and call them out, right? But I think, see, all those predictions are true, and jokes aside, and again, I think tech and process, it will keep happening, but I definitely think what has been happening in the last 2 years, right? And while the macroeconomic environment in Europe is still, I won't say back, and there are still challenges, especially with Germany and all. I think the market sentiment in North America has improved a lot, right? And if I talk, and I remember the time around Great Resignation, Talent War, we had CXOs and all just showing us the sheets around, hey, I'm tracking each and every resignation today, right? Because that's the level of scrutiny that I am under. I think over the last couple of years, the focus has shifted away, and companies that have continued to value their employees while taking a productivity first approach, I think I'm fine with them, right? They are going to come out as the true winners in this phase. But companies that have taken a productivity only approach, for me at least, North America, with the labor market data that has come out, right, with the market sentiment improving, I think retaining talent, attracting talent would be a key challenge, right? Which essentially will mean disruptions for your clients, disruption within your services, and the leadership will need to spend a lot of time to manage that talent lost, because it's a ship of people who are just ready to jump out of it, because they don't see the workplace to be a sustainable workplace to them, right? They don't want them to be seen merely as units of productivity. So at least for me, that is one thing. I see a mini talent war brewing up, at least in the US, if the market sentiments continue to improve. So, with this, let me again, we have the last 6 minutes of the discussion. So, let me try to summarize the discussion, right? I think we talked about different angles. I think the most interesting part still remains the magical features, that everyone talked about the digital workplace. But we also talked about some of the things why we are seeing this oscillation of the workplace between productivity and experience. We were in an experience-centric workplace environment a couple of years back, but given the tough macroeconomic, environment, tech innovation, especially Gen AI, Copilot, it seems that we have drifted away in a productivity-centric workplace environment. And while that is not a challenge in itself, it seems to be coming off at the expense of employee experience. We talked about what a productivity for only workplace, what would be tech and process requirement for that sort of workplace look like. We also talked about what are some of those advantages which look to be short term in nature, but some of the drawbacks which may only come out in the long term, right, when your brand equity suffers. And then we also talked about that tools only is not the answer, right? Pumping in more tools does not solve the problem. It may actually lead to a point of digital aversion, and this would be true for all generations, right, whether old or even the newer tech savvy generation. You cannot just keep pumping new tools, and the focus needs to be adoption, not implementation. We need to understand that successful implementation do not equate to successful adoption. And then I think finally wrapped up with the top predictions, how service desk is expected to face some disruption due to technologies such as AI PCs, Copilot, Gen AI. While we are seeing some silver lining for the desk side market, I think service desk is going to suffer slightly. We are also seeing the agentic AI and the army of bots. What we are saying, I think we also talked about digital bots, digital labor, and how digital interactions are set to surpass human interactions. So I think ultimately, at least for me, it was a very enriching discussion. I hope all the viewers and audiences found the discussion to be helpful. I really enjoyed reading all the comments and answering them. I'm sure Pravneet, Samishta, you also enjoyed all of them. And I think Pravneet, you also have a giveaway. So I'll pass it to you guys for the wrap up. But yeah, again, thank you everyone for joining in. I appreciate you taking out the time and wish you a happy new year once again. I think we're still within the cutoff date for me, which is January 15. So let me wish you a happy new year.
Yeah. Again, thank you to all the audience for joining and for making this conversation very interactive through your comments and questions. So again, thanks for that. As a token of our appreciation to all the joinees, you can download our digital workplace almanac report, which has very interesting insights and our peak, results. And also, you can schedule a 30-minute discussion with us if you found our conversation interesting, or if you have any other new insights or themes to discuss with us. So you can schedule that call too. So thanks, everyone. Looking forward to
Thank you.
more
See ya.
discussions.
Thank you, everyone.